Dimel. She is a practicing architect who started her own practice with architecture experiences during her stay in Oman, and now it is over 25 years of practice in consortium and architectural work consisting of residence buildings, office buildings, warehouses, and mixed buildings. She was a chairperson of the Professional Affairs Board of SLIA and also the Vice President of SLIA Session 2020 and 2021 and Session 2022-2023. Further, Chairperson of the Architects Work Trade and Exhibition Session 2021, 2022, 2022 and 2023 respectively. This public discussion forum, which is now open to you, is holding the chair by the presenter, Architect Dilummini Dimel. Over to you, Architect Dilummini Dimel.
Good evening, architects, students, and all visitors who are here in our exhibition. I will be talking about, actually, mostly I'll be addressing the considerations when selecting a land to build, focusing on the people who wish to buy a land and build house or a building. So there are certain things that we have to consider before we buy a land in order to avoid disappointment later. So that is what I am concentrating today with you. I think you saw beautiful buildings before, and in order to make them realize, these things should be looked into beforehand. Sourcing an architect and team. Actually speaking, before you build, you have to look for a person who has got an education and experience in doing so, rather than trying to do it alone or with whoever who come across your way. To select an architect and a team that suits you. SLIA, Sri Lanka Institute of Architects, they have published 2 books. So I want to make you aware about these books. That will be, you can see them at the publication desk. One, Directory of Members and Architects Practices. So there, the list of qualified people are visible, and some of the practices and the work also visible. You get details about the architects when you go through this book. Also, there's another book called Before You Build, as a guide for architects' responsibility, scope, and process. So once you go through these books, you can get to know an architect and also some idea about what are the responsibilities that you have to make there, and also you expect from the architect, and what is the process that you have to continue. Initially, when you before you purchase the land, you have to get the confirming legal ownership. How are you going to get the legal ownership, confirmation on the legal ownership? So confirm with the land registry that the land for sale is registered under the ownership of the seller. So that is very important. We have come across many clients and owners of land that they just buy the land. Finally, once when they start getting working on the approval process or planning or contacting with the architect, only they get to know that this land does not belong to the seller. So sometimes you are too late in order to change your decision also. You have paid some money. So it is very important where you could check this land registry and check whether this particular land that you are planning to buy is owned by the seller. If land has a clear title, ensure that the subdivision plan has been approved by the local authority. That is another thing. What is subdivision plan? I am focusing mostly the general public. So I would like to explain these things so for the benefit of them. Subdivision plan means that once you get the land, you get the survey plan. You get the surveyor to measure the land and divide the land. So you have to double check whether this subdivision is approved and legal. You can check that with your local authority. Boundary and demarcation on site. That is another important thing that you have to check. Whether your boundaries are clearly marked physically on site. Whether that is overlapping with any other person's land or any reservations. If not, get a verification from a surveyor. So this is also very important. Otherwise, if you don't get your land demarcated properly, the boundary is demarcated, you might end up with building on other person's land. When you realize that, it will be too late. And you have to consider about the shape of the land. At times, you get irregular lands. You get narrow strips. Shape of the land affects many aspects of the building. The width to the length ratio is very important, including the outer look and the shape of the building and rear space, reservation. All these things will affect with the shape of the land. For example, now if you look at this linear one, the narrow rectangular narrow one, the road facing the longer length, and so that there is a regulation that you have to leave space 10 feet away from the boundary, front boundary, furthest to the boundary, front boundary 10 feet. From the furthest to the entrance front boundary, the other boundary, you have to leave 10 feet beyond, without going up to the boundary if there is no road there. So now if you buy a land like that, we have got experience in serving this type of clients, so that along the boundary, rear boundary, you have to leave the rear space. So that is going to be a problem, and if you have 7 or 8 perches or small land plot, you will be leaving most of the land as the rear space. So this land is not economical for you to build. In such a situation, you can work out with special permission from the local authority and get the rear space towards the side of the, not as the normal. So those are the things that you could do. You can give a special request to the local authority in order to get special permission to have a rear space onto the side, rather narrow boundaries. Legal right of way to site. This house is in Dehiwala, and so this is just an example that I am trying to show. Now with the width of the land, width of the road, access road, there are a number of houses that you could enter into, so subdivided into. So those things also you have to check. Otherwise later, if especially in little suburban areas, this could happen more than in urban areas, you will have problems at the municipal and local authority when you go to get the subdivision or the approval. So you have to be careful whether the access road width is enough for the purpose. With the number of houses, so this I have given a small, I have taken an extract from the UDA book, so that what are the number of houses you could enter from the particular road. So it gives here VDA අවම පළල 3 meters. එතකොට VDA උපරිම පළල 50. බිම් කට්ටි ප්‍රමාණය කොච්චරද? එන්නේ ඒ වගේ ඔයගලන්ට මේ සම්බන්ධව අවබෝධයක් ලබා ගන්න පුළුවන් UDA approval guide book එක බලලා. උපරිම වාසස්ථාන කීයක් සෑදිය හැකිද? Terrain and slopes of land. ඒකත් හරි වැදගත් එකක්. ඒ කියන්නේ බෑවුම් සහිත ඉඩම් ගැන. Surface water drainage, erosion, stability, possibility of having a strong and secure foundation. So these things are also very important. When you buy a land, you have to see the history. You have to just study the context. You have to walk around and see, especially the sloping areas, you got to be very careful in selecting a land. Soil condition of land. This of course, maybe before you buy the land, you might find it difficult. You can't go and dig the land. The owners may not allow you to dig the land and check the soil condition and soil engineering. All those things will not be possible before you buy the land. So in such situation, before the substructure is done, after you purchase the land, or before you build the land, before you purchase the land, you can speak to the neighbors. You can see what are the recently built houses or buildings around. You can speak to them and just inquire about the soil condition, and you can, if it is available, you can refer to the soil test reports. So that is how you could check the soil condition before you buy. After you buy, with your consultant, he or she will direct you how to do and what to do. So it's important to check the soil condition before you start your building. And it is very important, if the soil is not that strong, hard, if it is weak, to obtain services of a structural engineer. It's very important in order to make sure that you have a strong foundation, substructure. Water table. That is another item that connected with the soil, where the water table is too high. If you want to build a basement, then there will be, that will affect the building, and you will have to spend more on the waterproofing. So the substructure will take more expenditure than the superstructure. Substructure කියන්නේ පොළවෙන් යට කොටසට වැඩි වියදමක් කරන්න වෙනවා පොළවෙන් උඩ කොටසට වඩා. ඒකත් ඔබට ප්‍රශ්නයක් වෙනවා. අද තියෙන මේ ආර්ථික තත්ත්වය මත අපි මේ දේවල් බලන්නේ නැතුව, මේ දේවල් ගැන සලකන්නේ නැතුව අපි ගොඩනැගිල්ලක් ඉදිකර ගැනීමට උත්සාහ ගත්තොත් අපිට නිවස හෝ ගොඩනැගිල්ල නිමා කර ගැනීමේදී අපහසුකම් එන්න පුළුවන්. අද බඩුවල මිල, නිමාවන් වල මිල දිහා අපි බලනකොට මේ දේවල් ඉතාමත් වැදගත්. මේවා පොඩි දේවල් වගේ පෙනුනත් ඇත්තටම මේවා සලකලා බලනකොට අපිට දැඩි අපහසුතාවලට පසුව පත්වීමට තියෙන අවස්ථාව අඩු කර ගන්න පුළුවන්. Yes. High water table can affect the sewer and wastewater disposal system too, and can affect the foundations during construction. If the site is close to a river, drain or other water body, does the water flooding affects the site during rainy season? These are other things that you have to be careful of. Now, if it is a low-lying area where the water table is high, now when you place your wastewater pits, sewer pits, it could get affected when the water pressure pushes the tank, it could come up. So those things are common in some sites. If you don't bother and if you don't work out the correct details, and if you don't select your land in a suitable, careful way. Public utility infrastructure affecting the site. There are certain things that public facilities are provided by the state. Water lines, drains, wells. So there are reservations. Now when there are drains, there are reservations. You have to check these things from the relevant authorities. If you don't leave that space, if you build over it, you could face problems with the authorities again when you go to get the approval or when you go to get the COC. Overhead electricity lines and post. Not only the approval, but there is a danger also. Public roads and transformers. Public roads mostly, there are two things called building line and street line. Not only public roads, some private roads also they have this building line. අපි එකට කියනවා වීදි රේඛා, ගොඩනැගිලි රේඛා, සීමාවන්. අපිට ඒක ප්‍රාදේශීය සභාවෙන් ලබා ගන්න පුළුවන්. ගොඩනැගිල්ල සාදා ගැනීමට පෙර අපේ සර්වේ ප්ලෑන් එකේ මාක් කරලා ඒක අපේ ප්ලෑන් එක අඳින ආකිටෙක්ට් දිය යුතුයි. එතකොට තමයි ඔහුට හෝ ඇයට ඒ සීමාව ලකුණු කරලා ඒ සීමාව ඉක්මවන්නේ නැතිව මේ ගොඩනැගිල්ල නිර්මාණය කර ගැනීමට හැකියාව ලැබෙන්නේ. You must have seen in certain roads when the road widens, the houses are getting broken down. So that is a result of not caring about these things most of the time, not always. Even underground utilities, you may not see those things. So you have to be careful before you buy a land or select a land. All this public utility infrastructure affecting the site, and later it will affect the building. And the other one is zoning. Identifying the zones. So especially the urban areas, the Colombo is divided into different zones. This also you can see in the Urban Development Authority guidebook. So residential, commercial, prime residential and industrial. So you have to be aware about, now in case if you want to build a commercial building, and if you go and buy a land in prime residential area, you might face difficulties there. Because when you go to, practically when you build, you won't be able to get the approval for building. So this is the picture that we extracted from the Urban Development Authority book. And reservations. I think I mentioned about the reservations in other items as well. There are many types of reservations that designers should look into. Clearly, before you select the land, you have to have some idea about this. I think I mentioned some of this under other topics. Building line reservation, street line reservations, reservations for water bodies, rivers and drains, coastline reservation, forest reservations. So if your land is closer to this any of these areas, you have to be careful You have to get the advice from your architect and plan accordingly. Future public developments, that is another thing, especially in public areas, in townships. Check with the local authority if any future development is planned that would affect the site. Highways, roads, hospitals, schools or universities, expansions, and any public item. So you have to be careful, otherwise if you don't check on these things together with your architect, later when the development starts, as I mentioned before, your building will get caught to this system, and later your only investment will be at a risk. Also, non-vesting certificate. You have to receive the non-vesting certificate from the local authority. Proximity to general facilities. So that is also another thing in social life. If you are with a family with children, so you need so many other services, close proximity to you. Proximity to schools, proximity to supermarkets or other shops, proximity to hospitals and health facilities, proximity to places of worship, proximity to leisure activities, play areas, links, main roads and highways. So these are also worth looking into in order to make yourself more comfortable and also to prevent long traveling hours. If you can afford the land, you can avoid long distance traveling and wasting your time, and now fuel crisis, this economic crisis. So it will affect you more when you live away from your office or working place. So it's very important to think. External environmental factors. Pollution due to out of control environmental factors close to site. Air pollution due to industries or other air polluting establishments. Groundwater pollution due to discharge of chemicals, sewer or similar pollutants from adjacent environment. Sound pollution due to close proximity to airports, railway tracks and highways. So these are some of the other important items that you have to look into in order to avoid uncomfortable living conditions.